Hey everyone, this is Sereni. Welcome to another video where I will be talking about Clashground Pasay and how I almost got into the top 16 with a bounty deck. So here's my copy of Clashground Pasay. I've been wanting to get this card since its release, and one of my favorite details of the card is here in the corner you can see a small text of Mall of Asia, and it's paying so much attention to detail. I love it, and I won't be taking this card out of its seal anytime soon. And speaking of the bounties, actually, I won the bounty for Pestilence Toxic Presence, and here is my prize. The textless Pestilence V2 Servant. It was so worth getting this card, and so hard actually. My competitor and we were having a really close game where in the final score was a 1 point difference. So how did I do in this tournament? Out of 53 players, I got 19th. I had 2 wins, 1 loss, and 3 draws, while my opponent, my competitor for the bounty, had, if I remember correctly, 2 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws. Yes, we only had a 1 point difference between winning and losing, and I'm so glad I won this. I got this card in the end. It made everything so worth it. So, moving on to the deck list, you already know I'm using Pestilence Toxic Presence. This deck, I actually mix in a bit of magnet cards to add on to the aggro, since one of the weaknesses I notice in this deck specifically is that it lacks the aggro to defeat other players, especially since most of its cards it's stalling. So most of the time I can't last long while stalling. I don't last long with this contender, especially when I do a pure stall. So I added in some aggro in order to bring out the best in this and to put pressure on my opponent who has virtually little to no cards in deck. So let's start with the list. We have Magnate Cunning Planner, always a staple in my deck. This is especially may draw power in the early game. I use this than Pestilence Mayhem Maker mainly due to the resource cost, because this one is 1 cost while Mayhem Maker costs 2, and I can immediately kill this so that I can draw for 1, and cards like Lin and Torque won't be able to take advantage of this card when it's on the board. So next one is another staple I have. So Pestilence Infectious, this is my 1 cost removal. Easy to kill, yes, and it's also good for removing 1 to 2 cards at once. I play 1, kill 1, and attack the other one for 2, and this one dies. Same with Magnate, same with the Cunning Planner. Cards like Lin or Torque won't be able to take advantage of this because it only has 1 defense. So next card is something that you might not expect, but was incredibly useful to me in the tournament, especially because Clashground Pasay was active somewhere in Pasay. So we have Magnate the Observing. I have 4 copies of this in the deck. So Magnate Observing is an observant card, meaning it cannot attack on the turn that it's played. So it also has Trigger Enter. Your opponent may put a card from their hand to the resource zone if they choose to do so. So it also adds into the card removal that Pestilence has, only that this puts into the resource. This may give the opponent the advantage, but you can also use this for your benefit, especially since Summer in Pasay is active. So if you have 3 resource, you can call this. You can play this. Opponent puts in 1 resource, and you can use Clashground Pasay, add 1 more resource, and you're still even. So next card we have is Pestilence Pandemic Warden, one of my most loved cards in this, but I only have 2 copies in this actually, because this is useless if your opponent has no cards. So this one, whenever this card deals class clash damage to a contender, that contender's controller discards one card, and if a clash card is discarded, non-Harbinger clash cards get -2 and -2 until end of turn. So this is a good board wipe for those small cards like Lin, Krung, Morak. They're incredibly useful and can do a quick board wipe for small ones if needed. Next one is Pestilence V2. So this is a needed card in my deck, especially since my contender does not have any draw in its ability. So this is my draw power along with Magnate, Cunning Planner, and another card that I'll show you later. So this one gets +1/0 for every card, but I use it mainly for the draw power when I have 3 or less cards in hand. Next one is Magnate, the Tyrant. So this is a good card. Flight, good for the aggro, and trigger enter, I can send an accessory to the Oblivion. I use this mostly on Krung because, well, they have a lot of accessories on their hands. I can also use this against Torque, especially when using Crimson Scale. They're using Crimson Scales, and it's a good card for me to use, especially it's flying, so it can't be blocked by normal means. Next, we have 2 copies of Kagan. Another card with flight and trigger enter, sending a clash card to the Oblivion. Strong card in general. Always something you'll need, actually. So next card, I actually use a legendary in this deck. So we have Magnet, King of the Gambit, where trigger attack, each player discards 1 card, and this card gets +1 in attack and defense for each magnet on board or in the Oblivion. So if this card gets 10 or more, this card gets breakthrough, and since I have a lot of magnet cards here, it's incredibly useful. And when paired with something like Impenetrable Armor, you can't put this card to Oblivion even if you use the effect of board wiping. There's no problem to it. As long as you have Impenetrable Armor, you can use it almost every turn and it won't die. It's such a cheat card. So, moving on to the actions, we have Magnet Gamma Vice. Incredibly useful because I have a lot of magnet cards in my deck. So this one allows me to choose a magnet card, and if the attack hits a contender, I can take a look at their hand and remove a non-clash buff card. And if I do, I actually banish that card. Incredibly useful because this card also adds into the removal of Pestilence. So every turn I get to remove not just 1 but almost 2 to 3 cards, especially when adding in Infestation, a clash buff that should always be in Pestilence. So this one can only be used if you have a green Harbinger, and contender clash card gets a +3 attack and the opponent discards 1 card. And I really love this. This can be a semi-necrotic card when given to cards like Pestilence, Infectious, or Cunning Planner, where they can kill big units while dying in the process. But imagine killing a 4 defense character with just a 1 cost character with this. The trade-off is really into your favor. Then we have 2 copies of I Am Decay. Cost 1 less when you're using Pestilence, and I use it mainly to refresh my cards due to its discard 2, draw 2. I can also use this when I have no cards in hand, so I can just draw 2 for free. Plus, I can move toxic counters to my opponents, forcing them to discard a card, and giving my Harbinger Clash cards 1 defense for each toxic counter distributed this way. And it can buff my characters like Infectious, or even the Pandemic Warden, and here the DV Servant, making them 6 defense and not being killed easily from other cards that you might expect. Moving on to the accessories, we have the most important card of this deck, the Defiler's Vial. So Defiler's Vial, this is basically your toxic generator. You always should have this on board, at least one or two. Better if two. So you can have a lot of toxic to distribute. And you'll always have an extra if it gets hit by some cards like Ancient Protection, Alternate Strike, or even Magnet's Plan. Incredibly useful card. Very, very important that you'll always have this in your opening hand. Next one is Shattered Shackle Blade, the last card I need for my draw power. So when attached to the contender, I draw for every attack I do, for every trigger attack, for every attack my contender does. And if I choose to do so, I can discard how many cards, and it gets +1 for each card discarded this way. My only downside to this card is that this card makes my contender to not be the target of any clash buffs. Not just to my opponents, but also mine, so I can't use Infestation on this. To remedy, I use Infestation before I attach this, or if I still don't have this, I just attack with the contender, use Infestation, force the opponent to discard a card, and if I just get this randomly, I just attach it, so I get consistent draw power. Then we have the traps, Plague Bear's Embrace. Really love this one because you either force your opponent to remove 2 cards, or if they play a card and they don't have the necessary 2 cards to play it, to discard 2 cards to play it, it goes to Oblivion. So what I often do is leave their cards to 1 or 2, and if they draw, I have this, play it, and they'll be forced to put it in the Oblivion no matter what card it is. And it's such a joy to kill cards like the Legendary Magnet for once, or Flare, the Flare 6 cost that does 2 damage for every attack it does. It's incredibly useful for big cards, but you shouldn't really use this that much. Only when you're having trouble with big cards like Flare, Torque, or even Genesis. So last one, for the accessories, we have Deafening Soundwave. This is your attack negation and one of the best cards in this deck because of its secondary effects. So it prevents all clash damage that would be dealt, and either you can force your opponent to discard 1 card, or target opponent may only declare 1 more attack this turn. So if your opponent has no clash cards and they only have 1 card, you can just let them discard it. Or if they have a lot, like Krung, who has almost a full board every time, you can only have them declare 1 more attack during their turn. And it's an incredibly useful deck, especially when going on defensive. And here is the last card for the main deck. Also good when partnered with Defiler's Vial. This is Noxious Alloy. I always have 4 copies of this, never less. So for counter attack, you may engage this card. If you do, move 1 toxic counter from a relic you control to target attacking clash card. And because of that, clash cards get -1/0 for each toxic counter on them. So you can just basically engage this, put a toxic from your vial to an opponent who's attacking, and it gets -1 damage, -1 attack. So the damage output is less. Put in even more, and you can give your opponent's clash cards a big fat 0 on its attack, and it can't do anything but defend. It's such a fun card to use, but the problem is if it gets replaced, it's hard to replace it. Also, you have the last effect, where at the end of each player's turn, if they control a clash card with 1 or more toxic counters, that contender loses 1 health. So this only works on the contender who has toxics on their clash cards. If the opponent has a toxic on their clash cards at the end of their turn, only then they will lose a life. They won't lose a life if my turn ends and they have a toxic on their clash card. It only works if they have a toxic on their characters at the end of their turn. So that's it for the main deck. Here we have our side deck. So first we have 3 copies of Impenetrable Armor. This one is I just borrowed a copy from a friend during that day. So this one shall remain like this. So 3 copies of Impenetrable Armor. This is a useful card because when cards can't be sent to Oblivion or returned to hand. So cards like Shocking Revelation, the card won't be affected. Deliverance, card won't be affected. Time to Go, card just stays on the board. No damage whatsoever, can't be sent, can't be returned. And I actually used this and I almost forgot how it worked. But it still lived because, well, yeah, the Clash card I had Impenetrable Armor, which helped me win the game actually against a Genesis. Was a fun match. Now, another staple for the deck, for the sideboard, Magnet's Plan. You can never have 2 less of these. You can never not add this to the deck because you have cards like Krung, who has a lot of ambushes. You have Torque, who uses Crimson Scales. You have to remove them in order to play your cards properly. So I always keep 3 copies of these. And if I do think to change it, I can always use. I can interchange them anytime, especially if I think that Plague Bear's Embrace won't cut it. I just replace it with Magnet and voila. Accessory removal. Now next we have Pestilence Plaguebringer. I actually didn't use this much during the games. I put it in the main deck once, but it didn't find much use for it in my opinion. So, well, this is a good card for the deck. I think I will have to replace it later on. Now, here are the last 2 cards. We have 1 copy of Gotcha and 1 copy of Advantageous Maneuver. So, Gotcha is a very good card to have, especially when you're facing Krung, whose ambushes can be affected by Gotcha, and it's also good against Swarm of Monsters. Yes, that happened once. I used this card, the only card in my deck. I only have 1 copy of Gotcha in my deck, and I got to use it against a Swarm of Monsters. And it was such a good feeling to have. So for my last card, we have Advantageous Maneuver. This is just in case for cards like Lava Blitz, especially because in Clashground Pasay there were a lot of mill decks. So we had a Lin deck, we had a Lin mill, we had a Krung mill, and the one I fought in Clashground Pasay during the first round was a Genesis mill. So it always had Lava Blitz in its resource, and it used it almost every other turn. That caused me to lose a match, so we had a tie back then. Useful card to have, maybe only 1 copy, so it's already good. But if I were to make any updates to the deck, I would remove these 2, Plaguebringer, and add Gotcha. So I will have 3 copies of Gotcha for basically Krung. It's for Krung. My main idea for the Gotcha is for Krung. And I didn't get to have 3 copies of this because I only had 1 and no one else had any more copies. It was, yeah. Still, it worked. I still got the Gotcha no matter how many times I tried to mull it. I had it in my starting hand. I had it in a few cards after that. And it was such a lucky card for me because I used it against Krung and it was so good. Sorry, I'm just really glad with how it turned out. I love how the tournament turned out. It was actually so good. 53 people attended the event, even in places from Dipolog, which is in Mindanao, or Tacloban, which is in Visayas. There are 4 places. Can be traveled by land, but it takes over 18 to 24 hours. and taking the plane cost is around 1 to 2 hours. Still, so many people joined the game, so many people played it. We all had fun, and it was such a good experience, especially since it's my first Clashground. And I'm really hoping that they continue this, because Alpha Clash is such a good community to me, and I really hope that I can see more of them, play more with them, and generally have fun. So next time, if there is another bounty for green, or another Philippine card that is a collectible, and I will so go play for it, because first of all, the Philippine cards, they are so beautiful. And the bounties, my god. If I am correct, this is a 1 of 1 in the Philippines, and there will be only one other given in somewhere in Clashground Las Vegas. That's, I think, gonna happen next week. So thank you for listening to my video. Please like and subscribe, and for any future videos I will be uploading, I will just generally have fun with this channel. So if you're up for some fun, up for some games, just watch us. Don't forget to like and subscribe once again. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good day, and good luck to the Las Vegas players out there. See you again soon.